This is all people, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, do you two remember Peggy and Taylor from last year?
I do.
Okay.
Nice
This
to
is
see
Matt.
you again.
He's started to work, he's new to the board, this is his second month?
Yeah, we
Third
have the second
month?
one, second, yep,
Um,
and then the other committee meeting.
yes, and then this is Peggy and Taylor from our auditing firm,
So,
Sandoval McKeon. And so, the point of today's meeting, first and foremost, is to, review the findings from the audit and the report that they prepared for the finance committee. And I would just say, to the extent that you can just go into some details to make sure that Matt is up to speed on, I'm sure you understand generally what an audit is, but when it comes to a public authority, what are the things you're looking for, and just as a good reminder for the rest of the group, so. I'll hand it over to you.
Great.
Hi.
So I am Peggy Rowe, and I am the audit partner in charge of the overall audit, and Taylor is the senior on the job, and she's been on the job a lot longer than I have. We merged a few years ago with Elaine Buffington's group, so I've been on the job a couple of years.
2 or 3?
Yeah, okay. But Taylor's been on a few years longer than that there, so but I'm going to let her go ahead and do the presentation for you guys. She'll go through the financial statements and then the report to the finance committee.
Yeah, I think I've been doing the audit for about 6 years with a single gap year because my mom joined the board. Even though I told her to not.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. That was a nice little, I'm reading the board minutes, and I go, wait a minute, and I call her, I go, did you just join a board? And she goes, yeah, and I go, Mom, I audit them. Yeah, that's an independence issue. So, one little gap, but we're back.
Didn't take the course, I guess. They talked about
She's a
all that stuff.
CPA, she knows, she
Okay,
didn't realize
all
it
right.
was the audit, and she was like, oh, whoops. And I go, yeah. Yeah, so for the audit, we'll jump right in with the financial statements, which is the thicker report on top, and then we'll do the report to the committee after that. But jumping right in, we start with our audit opinion. This is pretty standard wording. Starts off by saying we issued our opinion for the audit of the Auburn Industrial Development Authority for 2025 and 2024. And we say that it is a clean opinion, or technical term, an unmodified opinion. It goes on to say what our basis for the opinion is, saying that we conducted our audit in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America, or GAAP. And it also states that we're independent of the entity. Next, it goes into the responsibilities of management for the financial statements. We do the audit, and although we do assist in preparing the financial statements, ultimately it is the responsibility of management to prepare them and make sure that they're complete and accurate. Auditor's responsibility for the audit, this goes through kind of some general how we approach the audit, and that we exercise professional judgment, we identified and assessed the risks of material misstatement, we obtained an understanding of internal controls. Again, a lot of this is standard technical wording, which you'll see repeated in the report to the finance committee as well. Just required communication. The next piece is the required supplementary information. Right after this opinion, it goes into the MD&A, or the management discussion and analysis. With this being a government financial statement, a government entity, you're required to have that management discussion and analysis. And we do say that this is not a part of the basic financial statements, though it is required by governmental auditing standards, and that we did look at the numbers and inquired with very limited procedures on these, but ultimately the information in the MD&A was presented by you guys and has not been fully audited. But that is, and we do say in the title that it's unaudited information. And then finally, the other reporting required, there are now I can't remember. There's a statement in the back, required opinion, again, about internal control reporting and tests of compliance, and if we had any findings. That's in the back of these financial statements, just another thing that a report required by government auditing standards. And then we flip 2 pages, and that's where we get into the management discussion and analysis, and you'll see that unaudited in parentheses. So this is something that Tracy actually prepared for the financial statements. We sent her the kind of draft balance sheet and income statement so that she could use that to help create some of the numbers and fluctuations and things like that. But a lot of this information is kind of fluctuation analytical or analysis information to help you see kind of how the organization authority went for the year. Again, we did not audit this, but we did make sure that the numbers tied to the financial statements. So, I'm not gonna go into this too much, but it kind of gives a very summarized, condensed balance sheet and income statement, and then it goes into explanations, some fluctuation explanations for different balance sheet and income statement items, more thorough analysis, again, all prepared by Tracy. And I'm just going to skip these pages. We'll go right into the statements of net position on page 9. In the for-profit world, this would be your balance sheet. Nonprofit governmental accounting is the statement of net position. Just like a normal statement, it has your assets, liabilities, and your equity. You can see really everything is kind of same as last year. There aren't huge fluctuations in the organization year over year. The biggest fluctuations are cash, pilot payments receivable, and pilot payments payable on any given year. Since your pilots are due right at year end, there's usually a lot of fluctuation year over year just based on when people are paying. As you can see this year, pilot payments receivable are down. You had collected more of those pilots than last year, but cash is up because you had collected them and not paid them out by 12/31. Part of our audit is testing that pilot payments, because you're required to pay them out within 30 days of making collections. So part of our testing is making sure that all of those pilot payments, when they're received, they are in fact paid out within 30 days. And we did look at the ones that were not collected until after year end or paid out after year end, and everything. We had no issues. All pilots were paid within 30 days of being received. So that was something 2 years ago was a bigger issue, but in last year, 2024 had a bit of a carryover, just changing staffing. But everything was cleaned up and there was no findings this year related to that. And then, as I said, pilot payments payable increased this year with more payments being collected and not paid out yet. Included in those pilot payments payable is also the, from 2 years ago and a little bit of last year, the county penalties and interest payable. That is still sitting in that account because you're still waiting for forgiveness from the county. That's been hanging out for a year now, but they just keep pushing back and has not addressed. So that's just sitting in there, but you'll see when we get into the income statement on the next page that there's no forgiveness revenue reported for the current year. But you do see in the non-operating revenue and expense the forgiveness of pilot penalty and interest of $25,000 from 2024. That was 23 and 24 forgiveness from the city and school district. Administrative fee income was up this year with the 2 applications you received. I looked, at least looking at the board minutes, those still haven't closed out and been collected. What is the reason that those will kind of be hanging out still?
They're both still getting all their financing together.
Okay.
Bill Street Commons has we now have mortgage details from them, so that one, Glenn just signed the last paperwork on that last week, so that one should be in today. So it might be sitting in the bank account, I just don't know.
Okay. Perfect. Just because it has been hanging out for a bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
So no issues with the receivables or anything like that?
No.
I suppose. Have you, and I guess did we see if those receivables were collected afterwards?
So that, it wouldn't have been, so that's the Dill Street, that potentially is sitting in the bank right now, but.
Yeah. So, and then 4042 is also still getting the last of their financing together. So, yeah.
And operating expenses, again, everything is very similar to the prior year, slight increase in contract services. That's really just because Tracy came on partway through 2024, so 25 is really the first full year of her services. Other than that, everything is very similar. Change in net position or your net income, net loss of 44,000 this year versus a net income of about 15,000, or net loss of 15,000 last year. Next page is your statement of changes in net position. With the governmental accounting, you're just required to show your net position as restricted and unrestricted. The restricted balance is your invested in capital assets, your fixed assets, your property and equipment. That 310,000 just ties to what your fixed assets are listed on your balance sheet. And then the statement of cash flows on page 12. So the financial statements are presented on an accrual basis, which means accounts receivable and payables are all recorded, accrued. The statement of cash flows basically just takes that accrued net loss and figures out what the actual cash transactions are and kind of backs into almost a cash basis. So you can see the net cash used for provided by operating activities. So you had net cash provided by operating activities of $259,000 versus last year was net cash used for operating activities of $1.2 million. Ultimately, at the bottom, you can see cash and cash equivalents. There was a net increase in cash of $310,000, whereas last year was a net decrease of $1.2. And then the next page just does that reconciliation of your change in net position, your net loss, back to operating cash. And it kind of takes out those balance sheet items. Starting on page 14 is the notes to the financial statements. These are really not changing a ton year over year, so I'm going to go over these at a higher level just because there really isn't much of a change. The first note is your summary of significant accounting policies. It starts off with a slight description, very brief description of the organization, and then it goes into standard accounting policy descriptions. The basis of accounting, and this is a government accounting standard, your classification of net position into these categories, your revenue recognition policy. On page 15, it gives the pilot program some a little more information background there. We had 14 pilots in 25 versus 13 pilots going on in 24. Continues on with what a description of the pilot payments receivable and payable are, and does give a slightly more detail of the forgiveness, penalty, and interest in that paragraph as well. The next page continues on, more standard wording, talks about your capital assets and current year depreciation. One thing in here is the conduit debt obligation. Of $734,000. This is not on your balance sheet. This is an off-balance sheet item. This is Bluefield Manor. That obligation that has to be disclosed in the note. Continues on. There is the bottom of page 16 reclassifications. If numbers, amounts were reclassified, it didn't actually have any impact on the financial statements. It was just a presentation change. So we just note that if you were to compare side by side last year's financial statements versus the 2024 presented to me, there might be slight changes, but it's only for presentation purposes as things change in the following year.
The specific thing is we broke out the certificates of deposit from the cash and cash equivalents, just to show those differences.
Further on, capital assets are broken out into their respective categories. We disclosed the note payable was fully paid off in 24, commitments and contingencies. And then we get into that required, additional reporting required by the government auditing standards. This is very similar to our opinion on the first page, but talks more about, report on internal control over financial reporting. And while we do not express an opinion on the effectiveness of the internal control, but we did consider overall, in order to design our audit procedures, how the internal controls were working in the organization. And then if we had any deficiencies or any issues, it kind of gives a description, a definition of what a deficiency would be. But we did say we did not identify any deficiencies in internal controls that we consider to be material. We also do a little paragraph saying report on compliance and other matters, and that we did not identify instances of non-compliance during our audit. There are two, yeah. And then the second report is the compliance with the parish report, New York State Public Authorities Law. Again, just says we didn't identify any non-compliance and that this audit was all done in accordance with New York State Public Authorities Law. And then finally, our schedule of findings and responses. This is a required schedule, and it just kind of states that there was an unmodified or clean opinion, no material weaknesses, and no material instances of noncompliance, and there were no prior audit findings that had not been cleared up. And that's the whole financial statement.
Just for kind of a reminder about kind of specifically with public authorities, can you talk a little bit about internal controls and what the expectations there are for public authorities maybe versus other organizations?
Really, the biggest piece that we looked at for controls was the payment of pilots, making that kind of the biggest thing. We also look at, there's very minimal requirements for auditors with the Public Authorities Law, but gosh, it's a very brief, little Word document we have that says, like your investment policy, if you're required to have an investment policy. That's it. It doesn't really say much about what has to be in it. You're just required to have one. So that's kind of one of our check the boxes. We make sure you have an investment policy, and all your policies are uploaded to your website. So at the beginning of our audit, we kind of go through and download all the board minutes we can find and all the policies, request any updated policies that we read about in the board minutes, follow up on any other things that we may see in the board minutes that could impact the audit, but really the biggest piece is investment policy and making sure that because the pilot is your kind of biggest 90% of what you do, making sure that those pilots are being collected and paid out in accordance with the Public Authorities Law, which is that 30-day timeline, and that any interest and penalties are properly accrued and paid out or given forgiveness for. Questions? So far? Great. Very interesting stuff. So next we'll go on to the report to the Finance Committee. Again, a lot of this is just required standard wording that you'll see kind of year over year. Just kind of a nice little welcome. This is what this report is, and that we completed our audit for 2025. And then we go into our required communication. It goes through, says that we had our engagement letter, what our responsibilities are when performing the audit, including considering internal controls. Again, that first piece is really all what is in the opinion of the financial statements, although it might be a little more expanded on. Plan, scope, and timing of our audit. So we had an engagement letter and a client package that was met in January. Compliance with all ethics requirements, where we are independent and we are not aware of any other areas or relationships that could impede that independence. Significant accounting policies. There are no changes in your significant accounting policies. Significant accounting estimates are required to be disclosed, although we did not deem any of your accounting estimates to be significant. For example, if you have
fixed asset depreciation.
Fixed asset depreciation, yeah.
There's not a whole lot there left to depreciate.
So it's really not
Not a big estimate.
yeah. So that we might have had in prior years listing that as a significant estimate, but as your assets have really become kind of appreciated, we've removed that as not really significant. Financial statement disclosures, that we believe everything like significant judgment, all disclosures are included as necessary, most sensitive.
So what we do there, so I mean, at the end of the day, management's responsibility to have those financial statements, know the no disclosures, and it's our responsibility to go through them and look at them, make sure everything's there.
Corrected and uncorrected misstatements. We accumulated any adjustments we had to make to the financial statements. There was just one minor adjustment that we made of $1,000. Normally, if this was anything besides net assets, we wouldn't have even posted the entry. It's not material, but because net assets rolled forward, your net position rolls forward, we did have to post that entry. Again, it's not material, it's not a finding, it's really not a huge deal. And then there were no uncorrected misstatements, no other misstatements we saw that we didn't deem it necessary. Auditor's judgment about the quality of accounting principles, no difficulties encountered in performing the audit, no disagreements with management, there was no consultation with other accountants, any matters discussed prior to the audit was not a condition of our engagement or our retention. We identified no material errors or fraud. Again, the internal control structure, we didn't identify any material weaknesses. We did not become aware of any significant non-compliance with laws or regulations. And then once the financial statements are finalized, we'll have Tracy, and I believe, board president, Yeah, so we'll have two people sign the management representation letter, basically saying that everything that's been provided to us is correct and accurate, and that you have provided anything necessary that would be needed to complete our audit. And that the subsequent events that we look to see if there's anything that's happened after year end that potentially could affect these financial statements or should be disclosed, and that as of right now, there's nothing we're aware of that should be subsequently disclosed.
That's one of the reasons why we're asking about the price. Yeah. Where they stand.
Yes. I'm not gonna lie, when I get emails from you in like March being like, did you get that last pilot payment? I'm like, Jesus, can we talk about this next year?
It's nice having the QuickBooks Online access, because I'll peek in and say, no, not paid yet. I'll get it back.
Yeah, but it's handy. It definitely was like really quick to get through things this year.
Yeah, it's having access to someone's QuickBooks does make it a lot more convenient. It's a lot less back and forth of, oh, that's not quite what I meant, or I would like the report with this specific filtering, and
And it did us a favor by they're pushing everything online.
Yeah.
Like this desktop is getting very expensive compared to online, so that's been very helpful.
Yeah.
A couple different worlds.
Yeah, I feel like it was almost done by the time you even like reached out to me. It was like,
we lucked out. I had another audit that the client was not ready at all in January, and I said, well, I've actually received everything I need for this one about a month early, so I'm just gonna go ahead and flip my schedule around and have a staff basically prepare it all kind of that second or third week of January, and then once my schedule changed a bit, I was able to get in and review it, so that was nice. Everything kind of flowed a little easier. Nice when you guys are ready.
I was pretty easy.
Yeah. Yes, I have many clients that Monday morning go, what did you want again? And I'm like, the list I sent a month ago. Everything. But that's it for the board report and the finance committee report and the financial statements.
Other questions?
Good.
Yeah.
That was painless.
Yeah.
Good job, Tracy.
Thanks.
As always. I started a couple of years ago. I know.
And even last year, like,
Just left that room saying, can't wait to read that headline in the news.
Okay. So I assume the recommendation from the audit committee would be to approve, accept the audit. And by assume, I mean, when we make a motion, when we second it?
So moved.
Great. And you're both in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I probably shouldn't have done it like that in front of our auditors, but.
We're all on board too, however it gets documented.
Okay, and then, is there any other business that you two want to talk about in terms of audit?
No, can't think of anything else to talk about less than audit. Well, I live it for audit talk.
Yeah,
The
and then
more
always,
we talk about audits, the
and
more
then
likely something was wrong.
yes, I know. In terms of the corrective action plan for the OSC audit, we're right on track. Mark will actually wrap up the last piece, like this meeting today, is gonna wrap up the last piece of that, which was outstanding, which was to do an annual review, like a more structured annual review of the job creation, so that we can talk about it and talk about what's going on in those companies. And so once that's done, that's the last thing on that list to just kind of implement for the first time. So we're in a good place with that as well. And I might just drop them a note to be like, we did it, so they know. And,
Was that the one that also recommended the site visits?
yes, yes. And taking a look at our monitoring policy and making sure that we're either, that our policy aligns with our practices, aligns with our policy, aligns with our practices.
Right.
And that all those things are reasonable. So, yeah, we're in good shape.
Cool. My favorite.
Okay. Would you like to adjourn this meeting?
What? Sure.
Great.
Move it. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, we're adjourned.
All right. Do you want to consider your ass?
We're gonna talk.
We can
about it.
take them if you
Yeah.
want them, but